So getting ready to put the head back on. Don't forget your dowel pins. You would have had to remove them to get that block machined. Now just for reference, we've got the original head gasket there. And we'll just take a rough mark, minding this is not clamped down. And that one's about 47 thou thickness. Now these gaskets also have a different thickness code, and the code is actually how many numbers of holes are up here at the rear right hand side of the motor. These have got 3, and we've got the brand new genuine gasket, and you can see it's got the 3 holes at the end there. Understand that it hasn't been clamped down yet, so it will compress a bit, and that one's just under 60 thou thickness. So that'll probably clamp down to 10 thou or so. And here we have this Selective gasket, which is the thickest one I've been able to get. And you can see it's got 6 holes in the end of it. So if we measure that one, 65 thou. And I'm pushing as hard as I can there. So if you machine your head and also you machine your block, you need to actually put a thicker gasket on, because what can happen, like if you could see this piston is about 20 thou above the height of the block. Normally they are a little bit raised, but because we've machined the head, we've machined the block probably about 5 thou, we're going to just, to make sure it's not going to hit, the piston isn't going to hit the valves and the valves aren't going to hit the piston, we're going to go for the thickest gasket here. Now another little thing I'll just mention, it's up to you whether you copy it or not. I always put a little bit of oil on gaskets, especially on the head gasket. What happens is as you're clamping that down, if all the surfaces are dry, as things get squashed, they've got to go somewhere. So what happens, they go sideways, these little raised bits that are actually the sealing part of the head gasket. So what can happen is that it actually scrapes off, it scrapes tight instead of just nicely sliding like that. Just the same as when you put oil on your threads, on your head bolts. Probably a good idea to put just a light coating of oil on the head gasket as well. Entirely up to you. Do your research on that if you do it, but that's what I do anyway. I don't want it to go into the water galleries. Minimum amount like that. Bit around those dowel pins. We're ready to put the head on, and that will, like I said, logically allow the gasket to spread easier to find its natural position. And you can look through those holes and just line up. No, don't, you just support your side once we get one dowel hole lined up. There we go, head's on. Now, recommended to put a set of brand new head bolts when you put these on. Over a period of time they do break, or they can break, and then you end up with head gasket issues. Just make sure you always put oil on the thread and a little bit up here. Also, don't forget the head bolts have washers on them. And nicely coated. We're on the shop manual and you can see the sequence of tightening the bolts. You sort of go around in a spiral. It's 78 plus or minus 2, so you can say 80 Newton meter in that tightening sequence. Because the head gasket is so thick, you want to just double check or recheck your first two bolts or first few bolts that when you go right around, you'll find that they've sort of loosened a little bit. And then what you do is you loosen all the bolts, retension them to 29 plus or minus 2 Newton meter, and then you, after you do all that, then you go 90 degrees through that sequence and then 90 degrees again. And there's that explanation there. And also what they recommend is each time you tighten the head bolt, you put a little punch mark, or you can also put liquid paper or a little texture mark or something like that. Now because we've got that thicker gasket, I'm going to go 2 halves. So instead of going off in one hit, I'm going to go about half that tension first and then do it up to that. And it pays to do the middle two again, or those probably middle 6. You'll find that they're a little bit loose again. There you go, see? Just a slight amount, because that head gasket's so thick. And now we're going to the 80 Newton meter. That was 40. So this is like doing that first one. I just don't like to go straight off the bat to go from 0 to 80 Newton meter. Alright. The way I do it, I just remember inner, outer, then inner, and then outer, and then inner, like that. So I've done the second outer one. Now I'm going on the inner again. Still on the inner. And now we're on the outer. Still on the outer. And on the inner again. And again, we're just going to double check the middle. That's good. That's good. Alright, so we've tensioned it up. That's basically the first tension. Now we've got to loosen it all. To loosen it, you don't start from the middle, you start from up at the end, so you go in reverse. So we're on the inner. Outer. Still on the outer. inner, inner, outer, outer, and inner. We're back to the start. So everything's loose again. And what we did, we basically did that first stage in 2 steps. And now we're at the 0. We've loosened it off. And now we do it up to, say, let's say 30 Newton meter. Or 29 plus or minus 2. And then we're going to do the whole sequence again. 90 degrees, 90 degrees. And then your head bolts are torqued up. And now we're loose again. We're going to go to 30 Newton meter. Middle, middle, outer, 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 back to inner, 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 and we're back to outer, 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 inner, 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 unlucky last one, inner. We'll just double check that. You can see it went up a little bit. If you want to be really accurate, do it twice. Alright, so we don't need our torque wrench anymore. Now we just, basically you can just use a breaker bar and you go 90 degrees in that sequence and then another 90 degrees and job's done. Inner, inner, outer, 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 back to inner, 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 outer, 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 and the last of the inners. Inner, 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 inner. So we've done them all to 90 degrees. And if you can't remember that sequence, you can put a little number on them, if you like, with a texter, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and count. When everything's nice and clean and dry, you can actually write on there. Or you can do as the book says, you put a little stamp on them as you go along. So now I'm going to do the final tensioning, another 90 degrees. So again, we're starting at the middle on the inner bolts. And it's going to be pretty hard now, so you've got to really hold that. The engine stands on wheels, so you've got to sort of fight the engine stand as well while you're doing this. I've got 90, and that is quite hard. I've got a pretty big breaker bar there. And important not to jerk it, you want to just be going evenly. Inner. Outer. 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 Back to inner. 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 When you're doing this final stage, you'll know why you need to get new bolts. Inner, back to outer. And outer. And the last of the inners. Inner. 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 And the lucky last one. There we go. Head's tensioned up. You've got to make sure, yeah, I'm a bit puffed here. You've got to put your foot up against the wheel on the engine stand, otherwise it keeps rolling away. Okay, head's tensioned. We can go to the camshafts.